Avengers. See Todd by Todd. West Coast Avengers.
West Coast Avengers. Despite appearances, I'm terrified of heights. West Coast Avengers. Welcome back, everybody. Another week of the West Coast Avengers. Your host, Dave. It's not the West Coast Avengers. It's the West Coast Davengers. And there's two of us, so people are like, oh, what is this Davengers? It's a pluralized thing. Don't forget, Dave Correa. This is him right here. He painted a self-portrait of himself. Don't worry, Jim. There's about an eighth of a cup of coffee. Don't worry. I promise I'll be safe. Galactus will protect it. Well, I feel like it's been a long time since I've just done one of these. You know, sit down, talk to you about comics. We're not going to do any mystery boxes. I'm not going to show you some flea markets. No. What I'm going to do, dig through the PC. I'm going to pick out some hidden gems, some books you might not know. If you have been following along with every episode since the beginning, that's like 37 episodes ago, then you probably have seen some of these. But if you're one of my new loyal, faithful subscribers, this is going to be new to you. A friend of mine just recently said that he watched an episode, found out about a Treasury edition that he'd never seen before, and boom, it was on his radar. Now, before we get started, please like this, throw a comment down below, tell me what you saw that you were like, oh my god, I didn't know that existed. How can I get my hands on one of those? Click the link tree below, check out the Instagram, West Coast Avengers, every Wednesday night, West Coast Wednesday. I do a live sale. Coming soon to YouTube, watch this channel. Going to be doing some live auctions on here soon with my buddy Joe. And that's really about it. I'm super grateful to everybody that has followed, that has watched. I started this 9 months ago, and it's blossomed into something that I never could have imagined. So let's just dive right in. Since the age of 8, maybe 7, I am a comic book collector, a reader, an appreciator of art. I am not an artist. No, but I can appreciate art. If you want to see how bad of an artist I am, well, check this out. This is a one of one. This is the Involuntary Human Torch. Thank you, Matt Ritchie. Matt Ritchie, Rat136, was the one who named it. I drew it. So there you go. That is my art. That is the maximum ability I have to draw. That being said, comic book collector, art appreciator, since I was a kid, I keep the stuff I really love. And so I just wanted to go through my PC and show you folks some of the interesting things that I think that maybe fly under the radar, or just things that I really appreciate that aren't, you know, Amazing Spider-Man 300 or Fantastic 448. I know. Or Fantastic 449. This was a very recent pickup for me from a amazing store called the Bronze Age Batcave in Los Gatos, California. And this is Fantagor #1, the first print Richard Corben's self-published horror fantasy magazine, you want to call it. This is a very tough book to find. 1,500 print run on this first printing. Back cover is also beautiful. It's a little beat up, but the interior all black and white art. It's just a pleasure. I haven't read it yet, but I did flip through it and look at the art. It is pretty text heavy. You've heard me talk about Richard Corben on the channel before. He's somebody that I didn't know until I was maybe 20. 25 when he did some Hellboy stuff. Watched the Cartoonist Kayfabe channel, and I learned a lot more about him, and more comics that I look through, the more I find his art, and it's stunning. Most known for his horror stuff, but fantasy, sci-fi, it's kind of like a little bit of everything. Here's another one that I guess recently became more of a notable issue. This is Batman number 200. I've had this for about a year or so. This is the first Neil Adams on Batman. We just lost Neil Adams. Neil Adams was a pioneer. He was an amazing artist. He was one of the most important people in comics, period. He is my favorite Batman artist of all time. I have a tattoo on my leg, which is of his art. You could just talk about him for an hour or two. I just wanted to show this one off because I think this is an underrated book. He is the reason why Batman was revitalized and why Batman transformed into how we know him today. Without Neil Adams, there'd be no Frank Miller. So without Neil Adams, there would be no Greg Capullo and Scott Snyder doing Batman the way they did. Great issue if you can find it. Like I said, not easy to find these days and not cheap anymore. Another undervalued classic book. I appreciate this book so much for its cover because it is a reprint. This is classic X-Men #1. So this starts reprinting the classic X-Men stuff, hence the title, in 1986. But why is this book so cool? That Art Adams cover of the X-Men, personally, the most iconic team X-Men ever done. I think this beats Jim Lee's #1 X-Men. I think this beats most everything. Maybe not Giant Size X-Men #1 because that is pretty iconic. But this is the one you get more than just the new team. You get pieces of the classic team. You get Iceman, Nightcrawler, Havoc, Storm. Obviously, Wolverine is forefront with Colossus and Cyclops.
Cyclops is a dick.
Warpath, Banshee, Angel, Sunfire, Polaris. And not an expensive book. Art Adams, if you don't know Art Adams, just Google him or check out his Instagram because it's amazing. The coffee's cold. Maybe the greatest hidden gem of all time or the worst hidden gem of all time. Arguably the worst comic book cover of all time. Marvel Team Up, Spider-Man and Captain America #128. The photo cover. Speaks for itself, right? Why did they think this was a good idea? I mean, I could see it. It's 1983 and they're like, oh, well, we've got to do something to get these numbers up because nobody's buying Marvel Team Up. I got it. We'll get these two dudes to get spandex and we'll take a photo of them, possibly on a rooftop or maybe just on a backdrop in New York City. It's so bad. I love it though. This one, which has been featured on the show before, a hidden gem for multiple reasons. So this is Wolverine #90. First off, you got the front cover. Front cover is painted by the Hildebrandt brothers, Greg and Tim, and then it is illustrated over by Adam Kubert. You get this very original cover from Marvel in 1995, so that's Wolverine #90. But what's even more unique about this book, the comic book is comprised of multiple huge fold-out pages. It's a pain in the ass to read. But boy, does it really represent this art. You just don't see anything like this anymore. I don't think they ever tried to do this after because it was probably a pain in the ass to print. But then you flip a little bit more in the book and you get another 3-pager. Look at this spread. I would love to ask Adam Kubert how big this original art is for this specific splash. And then the last set of panels in this book, Wolverine's got the claws under Sabretooth's neck, and then he pops that third claw. So that's Wolverine #90. Not an expensive book. You can find it usually for $5. Just something that you don't see every day. One of my favorite artists of all time, Jeff Darrow. And this is Madman Comics #7. Mike Allred, creator of Mad Men. This series of Mad Men from Dark Horse had a lot of guest pencilers, a lot of guest illustrators. Jeff Darrow doing this cover, a big guy with Mad Men. This was just something I'd found recently, and I know a lot of my friends, people who watch this show, are big Jeff Darrow fans. And then got this from my homeboy, Matty, Mr. MM Comics. You remember Matty, right? You've got to collect this. This is Usagi Yojimbo #6. This is the retailer incentive cover. That is a Jeff Darrow Usagi cover. Stan Sakai doing the art on the interiors, the creator of Usagi, doing the story as well. But Darrow does love to do these big picture drawings where it's like a big action sequence and somebody's launching and there's just a lot going on. So once again, Usagi about to take on the tortoise and the tortoise people. And I think that one's a tough find. I bought it at one of Maddie's claim sales. So one of the funniest comics I've ever read in my life, and something that you will never see Marvel do again. This is part of the Marvel Knights era, the early Joe Quesada editor-in-chief era. This is the megalomaniacal Spider-Man, written by and illustrated by Peter Bagge. Peter Bagge, most known for his Fantagraphics work, and most notably the book Hate. It's a humor book. It's a dark humor book. Peter Bagge is a Washington local, Seattle local, I believe. And this issue specific is just a one-shot story. It is a gut buster if you have a really dark sense of humor. The basis of the book is, what if Peter, in his early years, had read the book Atlas Shrugged by Ayn Rand and turned into that type of person who is a controlling megalomaniac, starts up a company called Parker Industries, and this is different and this is not for everybody. There's some stuff alluded to on this cover that I'm sure Marvel was not happy about, specifically the gun and the liquid there that is coming from under Peter's head. Another one, find this pretty easily. It flies under the radar because people don't remember this era. But if you have a dark sense of humor, or you just want to read something different that you will never see anything like again, find this book. Something I found very recently at one of my local stores. And it is very Northwest. It is very much a big find for me. This is Grunge Comics presents the Pearl Jam story from the 1990s. Obviously, Pearl Jam is still around and my favorite band. You know, you don't find anything like this anymore. I didn't actually look at this yet because I just picked it up a couple weeks ago. Story by Jerry Kinney and Jared Phillips did the art. So literally, it's the story of Pearl Jam, and you can read all about it. It goes up to Vitology, their third album. That is the Grunge Comics presents the Pearl Jam story. A must find for any fan. Looking at you, Scotty. The biggest find of last week. Star Wars Tales number 3, featuring the only cover appearance of Musa Jar Jar Binks. Oh, I'm on a comic book cover muy rare. This is the only cover appearance of Jar Jar Binks. It's not the first appearance of Jar Jar Binks in comics. That would be Star Wars Episode 1, number half. I think that's the Wizard book, but the only Jar Jar Binks cover. And Star Wars Tales, along with a lot of the Dark Horse stuff, but this specifically these are hard books to find. They are square bound. They did not make a ton of them. They feature usually 64 pages. So this is just something, I found this while digging around at Excalibur Comics in Portland last week. You've never been, one of the largest comic book stores in the Pacific Northwest. Their back issue bins are insane. There's so many of them. Good prices. You find stuff like this. I think I paid $6 for it, which some of you are probably saying that's $6 too much, and I'm saying that $6 is not enough. Some of these are hidden gems. They are books that are very undervalued, or books that you might find in, you know, just the regular back issue bin that are worth more, or just stories you didn't know existed, or art you didn't know existed. So that's what I'm trying to show everybody here today. Many of you know, but I don't get to talk about him too much on this channel. Neil Gaiman is my favorite author. He's my favorite writer, and he's my favorite comic book writer. This is called Green Lantern and Superman, Legend of the Green Flame. This is a square-bound, one-shot book written by Neil Gaiman. Cover is by Frank Miller. And apparently this was a script that Gaiman had written, I believe, before Sandman, and they just never published it. And they finally published it. And it's this fantastic, fun little 64-page-ish story about Green Lantern. They go to Alan Moore's hell, like the hell that Alan Moore created in DC continuity. Once again, there's some great art in here. It features the art of Mike Allred, Terry Austin, Mark Buckingham, John Totleben, Matt Wagner, Eric Shanower, Art Adams, Jim Aparo, Kevin Nolan, Jason Little. So this is a who's who of like that era of DC. Once again, not an expensive book to find, just one that you don't see often because I don't think people talk about this book. Next up, we have another Neil Gaiman book. This is a adults only book. This is Cherry Deluxe, featuring a story written by Neil Gaiman. I believe it's almost like it's a short story poem that is illustrated by Larry Wells. Very, very X-rated. Cherry Comics was something that was a parody of Archie, and they ended up getting, I think, a cease and desist, or they got sued. And these are kind of tough to find. I found a stack of them recently, but I was really stoked about finding this one because it is the Neil Gaiman issue, and it's not something you see every day. They are actually hard to find and expensive. This is not in great condition, but it's a great reader copy. I think this goes for between like $25 and $35, maybe a little bit more these days. Cherry Deluxe, number 1, Neil Gaiman. Closing out the Neil Gaiman part of the show, we have Hellblazer number 27, the story entitled Hold Me. This is another one way under the radar. It's valued it's valued appropriately. It's a one-shot story written by Neil Gaiman featuring his very long-time and frequent collaborator Dave McKean. A beautiful story. If you're not familiar with the world of Hellblazer, John Constantine is an occultist. You may have seen the movie with Keanu Reeves. vastly underrated movie. And this just falls into, like I said, a single one-shot. Hellblazer number 27. Not an easy book to come by in great condition because of the black cover. I think I've had like 3 copies of this and I've sold them all, and I'm still not even happy with the condition on this one. That's just what it is when you're finicky about condition. But it is a great story. I've read it several times. Y'all know that I have an affinity for a certain Polish name artist, the Sangster. Sienkiewicz. Bill Sienkiewicz. Sienkiewicz. Bill Sienkiewicz. Sienkiewicz. And this is Venom Annual Variant number 1, featuring what I think is the best Bill Sienkiewicz Venom illustration ever done. He's done a bunch. They've used a lot of them as variant covers. They've used a bunch as trading cards back in the 90s. But this one, it teeters the line of being almost abstract, but it's not. And I just love what he does with Venom's eye. God, if Venom looked like this in like a full storyline, this would be the coolest fucking character ever. And I like Venom. I've always been a Venom fan. But continuing on the Sienkiewicz, here's another one. I've featured this one a couple of times, I think, because this is Batman number 400, a big favorite among mine and other Dave. Right, Dave? You got a cover by Sienkiewicz. The back cover is basically the version of this. So let me show you that. It's because there's so many words on it, you need to really appreciate this piece of art. It's right here. Amount of talent that worked on this issue. I'll just show this on the screen right here, and you can just see an introduction by Stephen King. But this is what DC was doing when they were doing their anniversary issues in the 80s, was having a whole host of talent so Superman, Wonder Woman both got this same treatment. Obviously, it's not going to be as good as Batman, but they got the same treatment with the massive amounts of talent in one issue. Closing out the Sienkiewicz, you have Dazzler number 33. I got to thank my friend Max Sterling, aka Brian, for turning me on to this issue. I didn't know that there was a thriller parody on Dazzler number 33 called Chiller. But as you can see, there's a reason why this book is super popular. And maybe you don't know about it, but now you do. Now you do. Pure Images, number 5. The first appearance of Ren and Stimpy in comics. Featuring the Spumco Bastards. So this is like almost like a fanzine. It's got a big interview, a lot of oral history about Ren and Stimpy. This was after, obviously, the TV show. But this predates the Marvel comic book. Tough book to find, something that didn't get a big circulation. Be on the lookout for this. Obviously a pretty iconic cover and very memorable if you do see it. That is Pure Images number 5. I did get a chance to just kind of sit with that book and read a lot of it. It's very text heavy, but if you're a really big fan of Ren and Stimpy, it's worth reading. I do remember when this book came out, Punisher 102, but I was not really reading Punisher. I did think this was a great cover, but at the time I didn't know who this was. Frank Turan did this cover. Frank Turan had a short career in comics. I believe he maybe did like 30 or 40 comics overall. Maybe I'm wrong about that. Lots of covers, not too many interiors. He did a run on Punisher that includes like 6 books or so, 7 books. And I think this is the one that people really remember because Bullseye just looks insane on this cover. When you look at this cover, your skin kind of crawls a little bit and you just don't feel right. Low print run on these. They were not making a lot of comics back then of a lot of these titles. Frank Turan, that's a name to keep on your radar. Look up his art. It's amazing. This is Giant Size Man Thing. Yeah. Giant Size Man Thing number 4 by Frank Bruner. And I believe it was written by Steve Gerber. And this deals with a very interesting, ahead of its time story about bullying and high school bullying and a kid who dies and gets bullied by teachers and students alike. Written in 1975, just way ahead of its time, very affecting story, beautiful art as well as a text-heavy story. So you get a little bit of both. It does take a little bit to read through it. The writing is a little clunky at times, but for the 70s, that's normal. And it kind of got me into reading more Man-Thing. I wouldn't be lying if I said I've been buying all the giant-sized Man-Things because I think that's a hilarious name for a book. But I digress. One to read if you can't find a copy. That's one you can read on the Marvel app. But it always looks better in print. Okay, here's a double one that I honestly do not understand how this gets not as much hype as it should. This is Thanos Quest number 1 and number 2. So Thanos Quest came out before Infinity Gauntlet. This is the story of how Thanos gets the gems. Written by Jim Starlin, pencils by Ron Lim, I believe also by Starlin does art too. These books were expensive back in the 90s. I was never able to afford them. I believe like they were 50 or 60 bucks each, and when you're 14 years old, that's expensive. I was never able to get them. I remember reading it finally. I think I borrowed my friend's copies and loved it. And when I moved from New York to Seattle in 2014, I did a little road trip. I took about 10 days and went across the country. I picked these up at a comic book store in Milwaukee. I can't remember the name of it. Thanos Quest number 1 and 2, just a fun, backstory to how he gets to be so powerful and how he gets the Infinity Gems. Must read for anybody. And they are still kind of expensive. But I think they are grossly undervalued. Destroyer Duck number 1. If you don't know it, a little bit of a backstory. Little backstory on this. Steve Gerber ends up suing Disney to try and get control of Howard the Duck, which he created, and it becomes a big legal battle. Neil Adams, big Neil Adams, who was always there to open his mouth and back up his fellow creators and artists, was like, we need to help Steve out. We need to raise money for his law fees. And in steps Jack Kirby. Jack Kirby does Destroyer Duck, Special Lawsuit Benefit Edition number 1. And this was to help Gerber with his legal fees. That's the history of this book. But what else is hidden in the pages of this book? If you flip to the last pages, you get the first Gru the Wanderer story from Sergio Aragonés. Sergio Aragonés creates Gru the Wanderer, puts the first story in the end of this issue, and Gru goes on to run for years and years, and it becomes a legend in its own right. It's an underrated gem, and it's like a double for double the reason. All right, now we come to the section of See Todd by Todd. See Todd by Todd.
See Todd by Todd. See Todd by Todd.
Also by Todd homages.
We'll do the first Todd homage. This was a very recent pickup. You might have seen it a few episodes ago. Radioactive Man number 1000, a parody of the Spawn 1 cover, and just a great fun cover parodying and homaging Todd McFarlane. As you can see right here, there's the Todd McFarlane scroll right there, and you can see Matt Groening's name is in there. S. Vance, Bill Morrison, and C. Vance. I'm not sure who the Vances are. The next Todd homage is actually a real hidden gem. Most people know this cover, Amazing Spider-Man Super Special, the first part of Planet of the Symbiotes. But here's the thing that most people miss. You flip it over, and you got a Scarlet Spider number 1, obviously homaging Todd McFarlane Spider-Man number 1, Todd McFarlane Spider-Man 13, Spawn number 8, and it goes on and on and on and on, and everybody has homaged this. A very early homage, a very underrated book for that reason. Also a key because it's the first Planet of the Symbiote story, and on and on. What if number 11, what if the Fantastic Four had all the same power, which is kind of wild. One of the few times that Todd McFarlane inked a Jim Valentino cover, but when Todd inks anybody, for the most part, he kind of makes it look like his art. So I'll show you a little zoom in. But when you see the face of Mr. Fantastic here, you kind of see the McFarlaneism in it. There was a Guardians of the Galaxy book that Todd also inked Jim Valentino. Just another one of those situations where you could see the Image guys kind of forming their own alliances before they formed Image. And that's proof right there that it was in the works. Another one that I highlighted both on my Instagram and in this show, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles number 50, City at War Part 1. So it's already a hard book to find because it's late in the first run of Turtles at Mirage. It's part of the City at War storyline when the print runs were low, and this is apparently a very good storyline. I've never read the whole thing because I don't own it all. So I'm looking at you people. If anybody wants to send me some of the City at War stuff, hit me up. Why I've sought this issue out more particular for a while is because the last page of this book features a pinup, Michelangelo by Todd McFarlane. See Todd by Todd, back page Todd page. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles number 50, City at War Part 1, Michelangelo pinup by Todd McFarlane on the last page. Usually this issue runs about 25 bucks or so. Okay, so I have 3 more books to show you. And 2 of them are regular size and one's a big boy. I could have picked many issues to go through with Bernie Wrightson, but I chose this House of Mystery number 217, partly because how horrific this cover is. This tree is about to eat that child while his sister or friend just kind of standbys and watches in awe, in shock. Maybe she doesn't like her brother and she fed her brother to the tree. Other Dave found this book and brought it to my attention, and we laughed about how brutal this cover is. And so I've been hunting for it for a while. I found a couple of beater copies, but then recently I found this for like $5, and it's a beautiful condition. The thing is also, with art like this and covers like this, I just really want them to look really nice so that I can appreciate them to their fullest.
Because beauty is in the eye of the beholder.
That is House of Mystery number 217. This was highlighted in an episode late last year. I had bought a collection of Treasury editions, and this is House of Mystery, the Treasury edition, number C23 in the DC Treasury series. Let me tell you about this book. First off, you get that great cover. You're getting art from so many amazing artists highlighted in this book. I believe this is a Sergio Aragonés story right here. That looks like his art. The next story, a Bernie Wrightson story. This is called The Secret of Egyptian Cat. Bernie was really prolific in drawing animals too. He was prolific in everything. The Widow's Walk by Neil Adams. So Neil Adams, not just the superhero guy and not just the creator rights guy, but he did so much DC horror. DC horror just destroys the Marvel horror stuff. Like, it just had the best art. So we get more Sergio Aragonés cartoons. So it's kind of like the palette cleanser for each of these horror stories is a Sergio Aragonés cartoon. And there you could see Sergio himself drawing. And right smack in the middle is a 2-page gatefold splash by Bernie Wrightson of Cain and Gregory, which is, I guess, some type of zombie creature under here. So after that center splash comes a story by Wally Wood, the legendary Wally Wood, EC Comics, Weird Science, somebody that you should know about. This is called His Name is Cain. And then we come to another legend. This is called The Devil's Doorway by Alex Toth. Another artist who'd been around, I believe, since the 40s and 50s. One of those legendary names that I'm just learning about in the last couple of months. Thank you to Cartoonist Kayfabe. Do you really need to know much more to know that this man was an amazing artist than seeing these first 2 pages of this story? A full-on Sergio Aragonés story at the end right here. So he was very prolific in DC during these days. And, if you don't know Gru, if you've never read anything by Sergio, please go pick it up. The last story, it's called Nightmare. This may be Neil Adams. I'm not sure. It's not credited in the beginning. Does look like it probably is Neil Adams. So yes, the last story was by Neil Adams. So finally comes a book, a huge key, but you wouldn't know it by looking at the cover. You wouldn't know it unless you really knew what this was, and I think it is vastly undervalued, and that will be Caliber Presents number 1. You're saying, okay, what's the big deal about this? Nothing, no big deal. It's just the first appearance of The Crow by James O'Barr. Everybody knows that The Crow number 1 is a very expensive book, but why is Caliber Presents number 1 not so expensive? I picked this up last year for about $250, which I think is a steal. It does not have The Crow on the front cover, but it sure does on the back cover. And this is a first print. It's in great shape. And I just don't understand why this book is not the expensive one, considering this is the first appearance of James O'Barr's creation. It went on to become, a huge movie sensation with Brandon Lee's The Crow, one of my favorite movies of all time. People are still huge fans of The Crow today. The book, every once in a while, will find a new publisher and a new life. This is not a super mass-produced book. There's not a lot of these that you see around. It's a little wild to me that this is not the big expensive book when it comes to The Crow, and that The Crow number 1 is, but that's okay. I'm just showing it to you. This is what I would consider one of the biggest hidden gems. Maybe you'll find one in a dollar bin. I could see some of this stuff like this being in a dollar bin somewhere. This was a lot of fun. I got to do a little bit of something that just like creativeness and just, something that was based on my opinion and my collection. And sure, I could probably do like 3 more episodes like this and maybe I will in the future because I didn't go through everything. I just started kind of picking out stuff that I knew off the top of my head. Let me know in the comments below if you think any of those are underrated. Like if I turned you on to something that you want now, which is great. That's kind of my objective with this show originally, is to just kind of talk about books and, you know, show you something that you may want that you didn't know existed. I love just digging through books, finding stuff that I didn't know existed, and exploring the unknown with this, and then just sharing that with you. Thank you once again. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Please don't forget, if you're not subscribed, please do so. Click the link tree below will bring you to my Instagram. You can buy some of the stuff that you see me pull out of these boxes. Most of the stuff today is not for sale. But that being said, when I find a second copy, it will be for sale. Have a great week.
Oh, I hate this so much. Oh God, West Coast Adventures.
What are Reb?
Because I love you.
Sienkiewicz.